Everything looked normal at the shooting range that day. Army Ranger Jack Mitchell was an elite soldier with 15 years of experience under his belt. The woman next to him seemed new, quiet, like just another ordinary soldier. Jack looked at her and chuckled to himself. This woman can't hit a moving target, he thought, and decided to make a bet. They would aim at a spinning quarter at 800 meters. Jack was confident in himself until the woman pulled the trigger. 6 bullets, 6 hits, and Jack's mouth fell open. Welcome to Veteran Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of assumptions, skill, and the moment when stereotypes meet reality, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we make about who can't do something. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Fort Bragg shooting range. It was 0600 hours, and the facility was coming alive with the sound of soldiers preparing for their weekly marksmanship qualification. The air smelled of gun oil and North Carolina pine, mixed with the coffee from the range master's thermos. Sergeant First Class Jack Mitchell arrived early, as always. At 34, he was one of the most respected marksmen in the 75th Ranger Regiment. 15 years of service, 3 combat deployments, and a reputation for making impossible shots in impossible conditions. His fellow Rangers called him Deadeye, not because he bragged, but because he delivered when it mattered. Jack set up his gear at Lane 15, his usual spot. M24 sniper weapon system, custom modifications he'd made himself, scope zeroed to perfection. He went through his pre-shooting ritual with the precision of a surgeon preparing for surgery. That's when he noticed her. Lane 16, right next to his. A woman he didn't recognize, maybe mid-20s, setting up her equipment with quiet efficiency. She was small-framed, about 5 feet 4 inches, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. No unit patches he could identify, no name tape visible from his angle. Jack had seen plenty of female soldiers over the years. Some were excellent shots, some weren't. But this one struck him as particularly unremarkable. She moved without the confident swagger of an experienced marksman, didn't have the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen combat. Just another soldier trying to qualify, he figured. The woman, her range card said K. Morrison, methodically assembled what looked like a custom rifle. Jack couldn't help but notice it wasn't standard issue. The stock was modified, the scope was expensive, and she handled it like someone who knew what they were doing. Still, Jack had his assumptions. "First time at this range?" he asked, trying to be friendly. "What?" She looked up briefly, nodded, and went back to her preparations. Not rude, just focused. Or maybe shy. "You'll like it here," Jack continued. "Good facilities. Range goes out to 1,000 meters if you need the distance." "Thanks," she said quietly, her voice steady but unremarkable. Jack watched as she went through her own preparation routine. It was thorough, methodical, but he'd seen similar routines from weekend warriors who'd taken a few shooting classes. Nothing that screamed expert to him. The rangemaster called for the morning briefing. Standard safety protocols, wind conditions, 15 miles per hour crosswind from the southeast. Temperature, 68 degrees, rising, and the day's qualification standards. Jack noticed Morrison paying attention, but not taking notes like some of the newer soldiers. Either she was overconfident, or she'd heard it all before. After the briefing, Jack settled into his shooting position for the standard qualification course. 300 meters, stationary targets, prone position. Easy work for someone of his caliber. Morrison took position next to him. Jack glanced over and noticed her shooting stance was textbook perfect. Her breathing was controlled, her grip consistent. Maybe she wasn't as green as he'd thought. The qualification went smoothly. Jack shot his usual near-perfect score, 39 out of 40 possible points. Morrison shot clean, 40 out of 40. Impressive, but not exceptional. Plenty of soldiers could shoot clean on qualification day with stationary targets at known distances. "Nice shooting," Jack said as they cleared their weapons. "Thanks," Morrison replied, already breaking down her rifle. That's when Corporal Danny Reeves from 2nd Battalion walked over. Danny was young, cocky, and always looking for entertainment. "Hey, Deadeye," Danny called out. "Heard you were thinking about retirement, getting too old for the hard shots?" Jack laughed. "I'm not even close to done, kid." "Prove it. Let's see something interesting. None of this qualification course bullshit." Jack looked around. A few other rangers had gathered, sensing potential entertainment. These informal shooting challenges were common, ways to blow off steam and prove bragging rights. "What did you have in mind?" Jack asked. Danny grinned. "Moving targets, real challenge." Danny had set up what the rangers called the spinner, a mechanical device that could hold targets and rotate them at various speeds and distances. It was used for advanced training, but also for showing off. 800 meters, Danny announced. Spinning quarter. Who's got the balls? Several rangers laughed. The spinning quarter was legendary. A $quarter coin mounted on the spinner, rotating at variable speeds. At 800 meters, it was barely visible to the naked eye, even with good optics. "I'll take that action," Jack said confidently. "What about you, Morrison?" Danny asked, noticing she was still in the area. "Feel like trying the impossible shot?" Morrison looked up from packing her gear. "I'm not looking for trouble." "No trouble," Danny said with a grin. "Just fun. Unless you don't think you can hang with the Rangers?" Jack felt a bit embarrassed by Danny's obvious baiting, but he was also curious. Morrison had shot well on qualification, but this was different. This was the kind of shot that separated real marksmen from everyone else. "It's a tough shot," Jack said to Morrison, trying to be encouraging rather than discouraging. "Most people can't even see the target at that distance, let alone hit it while it's moving." Morrison paused in her packing. "What's the bet?" Danny's eyes lit up. $100 says you can't even get close." Jack found himself speaking before he thought it through. "I'll make it more interesting. If you can hit that spinning quarter even once, I'll buy drinks for everyone here for a month." The gathered rangers whistled and laughed. Jack immediately wondered why he'd said that. Maybe it was the assumption that there was no way she could make the shot. Maybe it was wanting to show these young rangers what real shooting looked like. Morrison looked at Jack for a long moment. "And if I miss?" "Then you owe me nothing," Jack said. "It's an impossible shot anyway." She was quiet for another moment, then nodded. "Okay." Word spread quickly through the range. Other soldiers began gathering to watch. The spinning quarter challenge was rare. Most people weren't stupid enough to try it, and those who did usually failed spectacularly. Jack went first, wanting to set the standard. He took his time setting up, checking wind conditions, adjusting his scope. The quarter was barely visible at 800 meters, spinning at about 30 RPM. He controlled his breathing, found his natural point of aim, and squeezed the trigger. Miss Dirt kicked up about 6 inches to the left of the target. "Wind," he muttered, making an adjustment. Second shot. Closer, but still a miss. Third shot. He clipped the edge of the mounting bracket, close enough to draw appreciative nods from the watching soldiers. "Deadeye's getting old," someone called out, drawing laughs. Jack smiled and shook his head. "Your turn, Morrison." Morrison approached the firing line with her rifle. Jack noticed she spent very little time on setup adjustments. She settled into position, looked through her scope for maybe 30 seconds, then took aim. The first thing Jack noticed was her breathing. It was different from what he'd observed during qualification. Deeper, more controlled, like someone settling into a meditation rather than preparing for a shot. Morrison lay motionless behind her rifle for nearly a minute. To the casual observer, she might have looked hesitant or nervous, but Jack, watching more closely, recognized something else. She was reading the wind, not just feeling it, but reading the subtle signs, the way dust moved across the range, the slight sway of grass at different distances, the heat mirage rising from the target area. Then she fired. The metallic ping of bullet meeting target rang out across the range. "Holy shit," someone whispered. Morrison worked the bolt of her rifle smoothly and fired again. Another ping, and again, and again. By the 6th shot, the range had gone completely silent except for the mechanical whir of the spinning target and the sharp crack of Morrison's rifle. 6 shots, 6 hits. On a spinning quarter at 800 meters, Jack stared through his spotting scope in disbelief. The quarter was still spinning, but it was now riddled with holes. not lucky hits around the edges, center mass, perfect shots that had torn the coin nearly in half. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind and the distant spinning of the target mechanism. Jack lowered his spotting scope and looked at Morrison. She was calmly working the bolt of her rifle, ejecting the last spent cartridge. "How?" was all Jack managed to say. Morrison didn't answer immediately. She engaged the safety on her rifle and sat up from her shooting position. "Practice," she said simply. Danny Reeves was the first to break the shocked silence. "That's not practice. I don't even know what that is." Other soldiers began crowding around, all talking at once. Questions flew. Where did she train? What unit was she with? How long had she been shooting? Morrison deflected most of the questions with quiet politeness, but Jack could see she was uncomfortable with the attention. "Let me buy you a coffee," Jack said, sensing she might want to escape the crowd. She nodded gratefully. The base cafe was nearly empty at 0900. Jack and Morrison sat at a corner table with their coffee, the noise and excitement of the range behind them. "I owe you an apology," Jack said. "For what?" "For assuming you couldn't make that shot." Morrison stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Most people make assumptions. It's natural." "But you're not most people," Jack said. "That's shooting. I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never seen anything like it." "You've been doing it for 15 years in the Rangers," Morrison corrected. "Different kind of shooting." Jack sensed there was more to that statement. "What kind of shooting do you do?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "The kind where missing isn't an option." The weight of that statement settled between them. Jack recognized the tone, the careful way operators talked about classified work, about missions that never appeared in newspapers. "What unit?" Jack asked. "I can't say." "Can't or won't?" "Both." Jack nodded. He understood operational security, but his curiosity was killing him. Over the next few days, Jack found himself thinking about Morrison and that impossible shooting display. He made discreet inquiries around the base, but nobody seemed to know much about her. She wasn't assigned to any unit at Bragg that anyone could identify. Her range card listed a temporary barracks address. Her gear was too expensive and too specialized for a regular soldier's budget. Jack started to piece together a picture. Special operations, probably very special operations, the kind of units that didn't advertise their presence and whose members didn't socialize with regular army. A week later, Jack saw Morrison at the range again. This time she wasn't alone. She was with two men who had the same quiet, professional bearing. No unit markings, expensive gear, the kind of casual alertness that came from serious training. Jack decided to approach. "Mind if I watch?" he asked Morrison. She looked at her companions, who shrugged. "Free range," one of them said. What Jack witnessed over the next hour changed his understanding of what was possible with a rifle. Morrison and her teammates weren't practicing standard marksmanship. They were running scenarios that Jack had never seen outside of specialized sniper schools. Moving targets at multiple distances, shots taken from awkward positions, time constraints that would stress most shooters into missing. Morrison moved through each drill with mechanical precision. A running target at 600 meters while shooting from a seated position. Hit. A stationary target at 1,000 meters in a 20-mile-per-hour crosswind. Hit. Multiple targets engaged in sequence, each requiring a different elevation and windage adjustment. All hits. Her teammates were equally impressive, but Morrison was clearly the standout performer. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Jack asked during a break. "Classified training," Morrison replied, "but I can tell you I started when I was 8 years old." 8? My father was a Marine sniper. He taught me that shooting isn't about the gun. It's about understanding physics, wind, weather, and human limitations. Jack was beginning to understand. This wasn't just military training. This was a lifetime of preparation. 2 weeks after the spinning quarter incident, Jack was in the base library researching advanced shooting techniques when he overheard a conversation between two officers. "The team from Langley finished their evaluation," one was saying. "Recommended immediate deployment." "Which team?" "The sniper evaluation," Morrison's group. Jack's ears perked up. Langley meant CIA. Morrison wasn't just special operations. She was working for the agency. Suddenly, everything made sense. The expensive gear, the classified training, the impossible shooting skills. Morrison wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. She was an intelligence operative whose job required her to make shots that would determine the success or failure of national security operations. The spinning quarter hadn't been showing off. It had been Morrison operating at probably 50% of her actual capability. The next time Jack saw Morrison at the range, his entire approach was different. The casual friendliness was replaced by professional respect. "I heard about the evaluation," he said quietly. Morrison glanced at him but didn't confirm or deny anything. "I just wanted to say," Jack continued, "that watching you shoot changed how I think about marksmanship. I thought I was good. You showed me what good actually looks like." Morrison smiled, the first genuine smile Jack had seen from her. "You are good," she said. "What you do with the Rangers, in combat, under pressure, that takes a different kind of skill. What I do is controlled, planned, with unlimited preparation time." "Still," Jack said, "that spinning quarter shot was necessary," Morrison finished. "I need to maintain proficiency for when it matters." Jack nodded. He was beginning to understand that for Morrison, every shot was practice for a mission where failure meant people died. Over the following months, Morrison's presence at the range became more regular. Jack learned that she was conducting periodic evaluations and training exercises, preparing for assignments that he would never know the details of. Occasionally, she would offer tips to Jack and the other Rangers, small adjustments to breathing technique, ways to read wind at extreme distances, mental approaches to shooting under stress. Her teaching style was different from military instructors. She explained the physics behind each technique, helped shooters understand not just what to do, but why it worked. Jack's own shooting improved dramatically. Not to Morrison's level, he doubted anyone could reach that without her combination of natural talent and specialized training, but enough that other Rangers noticed. "Deadeye's getting deadly," Danny Reeves joked after Jack shot a personal best score on a long-distance qualification. One morning, Jack arrived at the range to find Morrison's usual lane empty. He asked the rangemaster about her, but got only a shrug. "She checked out yesterday. Orders came through for immediate transfer." Jack never saw Morrison again at Fort Bragg, but 3 months later he read a brief news item about a hostage situation in Eastern Europe that had been resolved by precision action by intelligence assets. No details, no names, no confirmation that Morrison had been involved, but Jack found himself wondering if somewhere, 800 meters away from danger, a woman with a rifle had been the difference between tragedy and triumph. The spinning quarter incident became legendary among the Rangers at Fort Bragg. The story grew in the telling. Some versions had Morrison shooting while blindfolded, others claimed she'd hit multiple quarters simultaneously. Jack never corrected the exaggerations, but he did use the story to teach younger Rangers an important lesson. Never assume you know someone's capabilities based on appearance. During his next promotion ceremony, Jack was asked to speak to newly arrived soldiers about excellence in marksmanship. "I used to think I knew what expert shooting looked like," he told them. "Then I met someone who showed me that expertise has levels I hadn't imagined. The lesson isn't about shooting, though. It's about respect. Don't assume you know what someone can do until you've seen them do it." 2 years later, Jack was conducting a marksmanship clinic for special operations candidates when one of them asked about the most impressive shooting he'd ever witnessed. Jack smiled and set up the spinner at 800 meters. "There was this woman," he began, "quiet, unassuming, looked like she might have trouble with basic qualification." He told them about Morrison, about assumptions, about the moment when 6 perfect shots changed his understanding of what was possible. "The point isn't that she was better than me," Jack concluded. "The point is that she reminded me that in this business, the most dangerous people are often the ones you underestimate." One of the candidates raised his hand. "What happened to her?" Jack looked downrange at the spinning quarter, barely visible at 800 meters. "She went to work," he said, "somewhere where that skill was needed. Some lessons come from books. Some come from experience. The most important ones come from moments when your assumptions collide with reality. Jack Mitchell learned that expertise doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in the lane next to you, waiting for the right moment to reveal what real capability looks like. Morrison, if that was even her real name, taught a room full of elite soldiers that there are always levels above what you think is the top. That someone who looks ordinary might be extraordinary in ways you can't imagine. The spinning quarter at 800 meters became a symbol at Fort Bragg, not of impossible shooting, but of possible humility. A reminder that the person next to you might be carrying skills and experiences that would humble your best day. And the somewhere in the world, when precision matters most, when one shot determines whether innocent people live or die, there are people like Morrison. Quiet professionals who learned their craft not for glory or recognition, but for the moments when being extraordinary is just another day at the office. Have you ever met someone who shattered your assumptions? Someone who looked ordinary but proved to be anything but? Tell us their story in the comments. Because at Veteran Stories, we believe that the most powerful people are often the ones who don't need to prove it until the moment they do. Subscribe if stories like this matter to you, because the world is full of quiet experts and their stories deserve to be told.